Pedro and Andre, you've got the first one. I don't know who's taking it, but you've got the first one.
Yeah, thanks. I was waiting for the document to load. So this Pedro asked me to provide an update on Verify Stage's efforts to refactor the mergeability check. And this started as an intention to simplify or make the code that handles the error messages and the states and all that live on the back end instead of doing a bunch of checks on the front end. They started putting forward a proposal of setting a working group in place for this effort. And then eventually an option of putting a architecture evolution blueprint kind of thing in place, which is a process more formal to do architectural changes. They checked and both scenarios were kind of discarded because the scope of this effort is far smaller and more restricted as it is right now. What I saw there, and Sam Beckham, the front-end manager, reached out to me just to get involved in this. And what I saw there is an opportunity to line up the work that Pedro is doing with the lovable merge button in case it requires any sort of changes on the way we handle error messages or states or anything like that. This refactor work that they're doing on their side can take that into account. What I've already conveyed to them is that their mergeability check is only part of the checks that we do for a merge request to be mergeable, because we still have the code review checks and we have the verify checks. The code review from the top of my head is dependency AMRs and unresolved discussions and probably a couple of others. So there is some sort of alignment required between our stages, between our groups. But what I see here is like there's two efforts working on this thing. One is Pedro's exploration on UX. The other is their part of the code. So I don't know about whether we should get ourselves involved from the UX perspective and engineering. Should we get product also involved? And right now, Sam is kind of waiting to know who to involve for like a kickoff conversation about this topic. That's the current status. Michelle, you have some notes here.
Yeah, Cheryl and I have been talking about this for weeks now, and I'm so glad that there's finally an issue, but to be honest, I have not dove into the issue yet. I did read some of it, and I think it solves a really huge problem, which is the widget itself and all of the different components that exist in there, but I don't think that that's the reason that we have all of these bugs. I don't think that's the only reason, and I don't think it's the only thing that's going to solve, like, even when you just said verify checks, in my head, I was like, what's that mean? I don't know what that means. Like, merge when pipeline succeeds is us, and also that, like, I don't know. And I think that's a problem, and that this issue doesn't solve that. So I do think that we should all be involved. I think that this, I'm really eager to hear Kai's opinion, but I think Kai should be involved, Tao should be involved, Pedro, everyone, because this is turning into a very technical discussion. And from my perspective and talking with Cheryl, I'd like to back a little bit out of that and make this one part of solving this problem.
Yeah, I think I have seen the issue. I agree. It feels very engineering focused. It feels like engineers are solving like a problem for engineers, and that's fine sometimes, but I'm a little bit concerned that like it's not the right way to solve it. And I say that because I don't think any of our engineers have weighed in, right? And as code review, we ultimately own sort of what that merge button experience should be and what that the direction and features that we want to add there and the work that Pedro is doing. And so in my mind, this should come from us with Pedro stuff to engineers and say, here's all the things that we found. Engineers, what do you think the best way to solve this is? And scary, we have 3 front-end engineers on here who have probably seen the front, and you know, Phil probably knows a lot about the merge button. And I'd love to know, like, if you read that, like, do you look at that and go, yeah, this makes a ton of sense, or like, no, this isn't how we do things, and like, to me, that feels just so far into the solution phase that like it's not at the right spot to like even have a conversation about.
Just as a note, this, and I agree with you with everything you just said. We should be owning this. We should be steering the solution. the solution is very engineering heavy because it started as such. It started as an engineering problem, and they involved us, and that's where we're waving the flag of, wait a minute, there's more work here that can be done before we even get to move the rocks out of place. So I think we're all aligned in that sense that we should definitely do a deeper analysis and come up with sort of a direction for everyone to be on board. And right now, the solution proposed is to solve their problem. That's it. So yeah, I agree with you. Everybody, anyone wants to weigh in? Phil, do you have any thoughts on it?
I guess it's more just a broad thought. Is I always get really annoyed when I see other teams sort of try to weigh in and take control of the widget. It feels like our little thing that we should control. So it'd be better if we were in control of the conversations, I would think anyway.
Yeah. I think we're all in agreement. So we already started setting a bit of that with the merge request widget extensions. There might be some overlap here where we can devise a format API, some sort of implementation that accommodates for those widgets to be able to get into these checks. So yeah, I think it's a far bigger question. So I think right now we're all aligned that we need to get involved. My biggest question is to you, Kai. Do you want to get involved from the very first moment on the kickoff, PMs? And I want that to be your decision. I do think you should, but I want that to be your decision.
Yeah, I just don't know if we're ready for that. And I say that because one of the things that we did intentionally was we sent Pedro away to a small corner to go like learn about this and figure all of this out, right? And I don't want to have another conversation until Pedro's ready to have that conversation about what we need the merge button to do, because it doesn't, how we architect it is very dependent on like all of the experience that we want to design to it. And until we're ready to have that conversation, like these other ones don't matter to me, right? And that's why I was sort of surprised to see this come up when we started our own like conversation from another direction. But like, I'm not ready to have those conversations yet. I don't think this group is ready to have conversations yet. Like we don't have opinions because we haven't seen everything that Pedro has come back with. We haven't had that conversation as a group to even have opinions to like talk to another group about what we would want them to do.
Yeah, I can see that. And I think part of the conversation will be revolving around that. We need to wait a little bit before we can even get our hands down to the code. So the immediate thing would be to just convey to them that we have an ongoing UX exploration. Pedro, do you have any expectation on, and I don't want to put pressure, is that something to take the whole quarter? Is that something, what's your sort of timeline there?
Yeah, so the like reinventing and having a more innovative approach to the MR widgets, we're not close to that. Right now, we're focusing on the merge widget only and the merge button and making that a little bit better. And it would not involve a significant rework. So two thoughts. One of them is I agree that we should own this as much as possible. And two, I think that this is something worth doing if the scope of what we're thinking in terms of engineering is just rewiring things in a different way, and it would not be a lot of effort. Because as Kai said, maybe in the future we will change things more dramatically or not. And that is still in the open. So if we just want to clean the house and that's not a lot of work, I'm okay with that. Anything other that would be a huge endeavor to refactor everything and would take 3 or 4 milestones to get perfect, I don't think it's a good investment of time now. Maybe it's something that we will end up doing in the future, but there's a lot of unknowns right now. So keep things small and if possible.
Yeah. Okay, I do think that even though we were focused on the merge button, the way we present error messages, what kind of error messages, what kind of states. I want to let that on your plate. You should comment how that lands on the next proposal, on the next iteration. And I do think that will affect the way we work out the code. So I think I'll relay that to the team right now. So I'm not so sure if we're ready right away to have that conversation as a big group, but I'll relay the feedback from our conversation here. And we might still continue to have like loose conversations from the engineering perspective, but they're all pending on your outcome on this thing. And I'll see what they come back with. Michelle, do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I do. I'm still concerned.
Okay.
Again, I just want to underscore that it needs to be reworked. I saw some of the example code in the issue and they were like, this is a pipeline error message that means this. I love that. We definitely need to do that. But still, I think that the bigger problem is, for example, I closed 2 duplicate issues this morning for Kai. You remember this issue because it's come up before. If you have require that pipelines succeed and you submit an MR that does not have a pipeline, then it just sits there spinning. And I'm not blaming it on Verify, I'm just saying there's a conflict in product on what these features should and should not do. And we have not looked at them holistically in terms of what if you have this merge option enabled plus this Verify option enabled. And so in my mind, that's still like just number one to me is this direction that we have conflicts and features. But I do think that the widget is like, it's super important that we can separate that. And I think that it will help too. Like if we have clearer error messages, then at least we can quickly pinpoint and say, this is their issue, this is our issue. Maybe we need to rethink this. But I still just think that it needs to come from a different perspective. Like this needs to be one outcome of a different conversation that is solved in multiple ways, with this being one of those ways. That's still kind of where I'm at.
Yep. Yeah, I don't think we should stop solving problems completely, but like big reworks, like they're proposing rewriting the mergeable method on the back end, that's where I'm starting to wonder whether we should get that on hold. But if we have problems like the one you mentioned, we definitely should address them. But I'm just wondering about
that's kind of what I mean. What is mergeable? Like, how do we rewrite mergeable when we do not know yet what is mergeable? Like if the pipeline wasn't there and we have that option enabled, shouldn't it be mergeable or should it not be mergeable? How do we architect that when we don't know these product questions?
Okay.
That makes sense.
Right. Yeah, I think it does, but I think at least we have some understanding of what the group thinks. It's early to have deep changes. We have UX leading, but we still have to look at the cases in between, and I think we'll just have to address them on a case-by-case basis.
Yeah, I think Michelle's point is more that like, and this is true, product does not agree on what's a feature and what's a bug of the merge button right now. And like to the question about like if you don't allow empty pipelines, but you have a MR that can run without pipelines not being mergeable, Verify considers that a feature and code review considers that a bug. So we have like differences of opinion on terms of like what gets you to mergeable right now. And largely that is because that is, and this is the work that Pedro is doing that I want to use to say, these are our expectations of mergeability, and these are like sort of not up for discussion. Like I want to be able to go back and sort of define what the answer is to all of these questions and give other groups, the hope is that we can give other groups like a way to say, okay, I need to add like this thing. We say, great, this is how it has to fit in. And these are sort of like our requirements for what needs to happen to the merge button and what needs to happen with errors and what we want end states to be. And like, you need to talk about sort of like all of these different flows that you could possibly get into. And then that's how you can add like whatever check you want to add. And then we get the end state that we think is best for the experience of users inside of a merge request, which is not the same as what another group might think is the best for their feature sort of in isolation, which is what has happened up to this point. I think that's why you see like the one thing I'm most happy about Pedro's work, and I hope we come out of this with, is like that button can only ever say merge, and it can never say like anything other than merge. Like, it can't say merge when pipeline succeeds. It can't say add to merge train when pipeline succeeds. It can't say all of these other things. It can just say merge, right? And that's it. That's all that button should ever say, because that's, to a user, that's what it is. And that is something that we have not ever like defined or been good about like trying to control that experience more. And we need to be better about that. And then I think that would inform groups sort of our expectations and how they might be able to integrate and architect with that. But I don't think, that's why I say we're not ready to have that conversation with Verify about how to do that yet. We need to have a better, these are the rules.
Yeah. I'm just trying to reconcile that with what are the next steps, because you're telling me that we're not ready, but Michelle tells me that we still have to solve a few things.
We have to solve bugs. And I think like there are bugs that come up and like that'll continue to be a thing. What I think we don't want is I think, and Pedro said this too, it would be not a waste. It would not be probably a potentially valuable use of time to go and start a massive refactor project today without knowing what that might need to look like. But if there are severe bugs today, we should be looking at solving those severe bugs today.
Is that fair, Michelle? Sounds good.
Yeah, and this, just for the record, this is exactly why I didn't participate in the issue yet. It's like I have stuff to put in there, but I did make it a quarterly OKR. So this is something that's on my mind. Cheryl and I have been talking about it, and we're going to get there.
Okay, I'll relay that to the team, and we'll keep bringing this up as we have more touch points. But thanks everyone for the thoughts. We're really looking forward to your outcome, Pedro. It'll look great.
Yeah.
We're gonna love
Thanks, Andre, for taking this on as well, and for keeping us posted and having the tough discussions.
All right, let's move on to another tough discussion. Michelle, go ahead.
Okay, we got 10 minutes. So the Kanban workflow, hopefully you all have seen this issue that the team has brought forth. This is an open proposal to support at least the backend team working in a more Kanban approach based on a list of priority issues that are not always assigned to someone, and we pick from the top of the list. So my questions are, what concerns do you have? And what are some requirements that you would need from us if it did end up being just backend who works this way?
So my initial concern right away is if it's just the backend, then how do we address the issues that are both backend and front end? That's my biggest one in that scenario.
So there are still assignments in this. I think that discussion's kind of already unfolded in the issue, but if there needs to be like a DRI for the issue, and I think you're the one who actually proposed this, which was a great idea, I thought. But if there does need to be two counterparts or a DRI for the issue, they can still be assigned.
Okay.
I don't have any concerns. Like, we already set a board, we set a list. If they want to pick which issues they want to work on from the list, I don't have any concerns. I just don't think it does what they want it to do. And so I'm concerned that like it's not going to be the right iteration, but I'm happy to let them like let them try it for 1310.
Yeah, I'm also curious about what is the problem that we're trying to solve with this.
So this has actually come up for many, many months, individually and one-on-ones, and then finally it came to a head like a week or two ago as a team on a sync call. So there's a lot of different reasons. It started out because our team in particular, and it started with the source code team, they're more distributed, does not feel like a team because we are super managers of one and we work on our own stuff and we only ever really interact with you, Pedro, or Kai as product, but not each other. It's recorded, so I'm gonna keep talking because we're short on time. So that's how it started off, as it kind of bled into like, we just have no idea what each other is working on and we don't help each other. And we wanted to be better about helping each other when we're blocked, or like we identify when someone needs help quicker than they may identify that they need help. And so all of that, we're kind of hoping in terms of like a measurement that will feel better as a team, more collaborative and more efficient, and hopefully reduce slippage. But I'm not sure that that one is really a measurement.
Thomas?
Thomas?
I have two notes now that you said that. I've brought this up a couple of times with Andre, specifically for the reduced slippage thing. It just sort of flips the script of like, you have all of these things assigned, and if you miss any of them, they slip. Versus here's all the things we could do. I'll pull them off as you have time, and maybe the last one you work on is going to slip or something. But the only thing that I have a concern was, Andre mentioned this when I've brought it up. I have a preference for like back of front end stuff, like not UI. I like doing more like logic work type stuff. And Andre tries to assign those types of things to me. And with this sort of like Kanban style, that sort of like manager input on where work goes could be lost. I've had a lot of UI work this milestone, so I'm not sure that there's enough back of front end work for that to be a real loss for me. So I'm not sure if that's a real big complaint. But
That actually did get brought up by the team, and so hopefully they're comfortable with that kind of caveat, because I do tend to assign issues that, number one, I know that you really like to work on, and number two, issues that I know that are going to be a challenge for you and you need to get better at working on. So their solution to that was like, well, if you really want an issue, you can still assign yourself to the issue. I'm not sure how I personally feel about that, but that's an option. But the slippage thing, you've actually reminded me of a really good point. There has been a handful of times, like probably a lot of times, where most people have already delivered all of their work, and now it's one person who's slipping half of their work. And that's kind of where they're coming from, where they're like, yeah, we could pick that up. And it's right now, that's really up to me to realize everyone's finished but you. Why don't I take some of this work and give it to someone else? And if I don't realize that, then you feel so demotivated because you like screwed the whole release, which is just not true. So it's for sure will help with that, I would think.
For that particular thing, I think we could have other solutions, but regardless of that, I think my biggest concern goes to something that Phil mentioned on his experience on working this way, which is the psychological pressure that you have if you're expected to deliver 4 things, and you know that you're expected to deliver those 4 things, and you're working on one, and for some reason that blows out of proportion in terms of complexity, and it's harder for you to get that notion that even though it's a weight 2 do not equate to time, it equates to complexity. So that's why I feel like it's a harder task for the IC to keep track of their own time. And it pushes, so we're trying to make deliverables more predictable, improve the say-do ratio. That's in our OKRs. And I'm not so sure this brings us in the right direction. I think it makes Kai's work less, not Kai's work, it's less clear what's actually going to get delivered at the whole span of the milestone. So I think it pushes in the wrong direction there, rather than make us more predictable as a team. But yeah, that's my kind of biggest concern. But I'm okay in you trying it out the back end, because I feel like the push came from you, and we see if we can the result of that. So yeah.
Okay, in terms of next steps, I think we can go to the issue for this, but absolutely the push came from the team and I just fully support them. My biggest concern as a manager is the predictability. And so just to be super clear, if it is in that board, we expect them all to be delivered. There's always really good reasons why we have slippage, which is like we didn't estimate it correctly. And so there still will be slippage. The problem I want to solve is it didn't slip because we didn't get to it. It slipped because something else was a higher priority than this. So, it took longer, more complex.
Okay. As a word of caution, Michelle, the order of the issue boards is going to be a struggle. So try to come up with a solution preemptively. Because so the problem with the order is that when you're dragging things from column to column, you're placing them somewhere there, you're changing the order manually, and you don't notice. That's a
Across
feature,
all
not a
boards.
bug. Sorry?
It's across all boards, because
All boards. Yeah.
issue ordering is global in the entire system for
Yeah.
reasons.
Both me and Pedro worked on plan team, and we know that that one was a bit of a mess to solve and wrap our heads around. So that's just a head of caution, a word of caution. Try to find a way to solve that reliably.
Okay, Pedro.
2 minutes, Pedro.
Yeah, we can. Yeah, this one, I don't know which one is more important with only 2 minutes left. Yeah, we can talk about this OKR maybe if we have time during the prioritization session. I prefer to jump to number 4, if that's okay. So we were implementing the skeleton loaders in the changes tab, replacing the spinners. Thomas discovered that this is a much larger undertaking, and I'm looking at this as a successful spike and learning experience, because iteration is mostly about learning. And given his feedback and the amount of work, I'm assuming that it would be a lot of work to get this done properly. And compared to my initial expectation of effort, I'm now thinking that this might not be worth doing, at least now that we have probably much more important things to do. Andre.
Yeah, thanks for that. We did pair up yesterday. Thanks, Thomas, for documenting everything in the epic. It made everything a lot clearer. So Thomas, if you have an update, please interrupt me. But we paired up yesterday. We have still some potential way forward. We're just not sure if the compromises will be acceptable from the UX perspective. There.
The basic kind of losses here are, we probably won't have something that looks good on mobile. We probably we don't have the logic available to really have the skeleton loaders really load in the right sections, like the header bar, for example. There's just no state for that, so it just kind of has to pop in when other things pop in, and the SVGs aren't going to look right, because it's just kind of art that we need to do. So we can get like something out and then maybe iterate on it later. We just don't have like the capability to do everything.
Thomas, if I can, I think the one that you mentioned on the top, I think we can add a third state easily. I think the biggest challenge that we found yesterday on the pairing is that there's an initial spinner at the beginning that we want to make. We want to show it as quickly as possible to take care of perceived performance and everything. But if we have to have an alignment on the file tree being open, the file tree being closed, all of that, it takes another step. So that will be delayed by a couple of seconds. And that's what I think the impact is the bigger, because we don't want to have like a skeleton show up and then after a couple of seconds, another set of skeletons show up. So the inconsistency there is a problem. But to have that, we have to delay the time that we have to show the skeletons properly in place, regardless of all the other problems that I think we can iterate on. And we can have the third state easily added. So there's still a lot of conversations. We might want to schedule a call with you, Pedro, just to go deeper on the UX, just to make sure that it's worth pursuing the solution before we pursue that even further. But we'll probably ping you on that and we'll talk directly.
Yeah, I think if it's much more work UX wise, I don't think it's worth doing.
Okay.
We have much more other important things to do.
Okay, so I'll look for a time that we can get together, the three of us, and we'll talk about our findings, and we'll then make a decision whether we pursue it or not. Over time. Thanks, everyone. Thanks for joining.